Hey, here's a fun idea. Let's talk about Medusa. Because that's not a divisive topic. Medusa is definitely one of the most iconic, most recognizable, and well-known creatures or characters in all of Greek mythology. And as such, she's one people love to argue about. If you've seen stuff like Clash of the Titans, or Percy Jackson, or well, the other Clash of the Titans or the other Percy Jackson, you'll know that Medusa has primarily been used as an antagonist in adaptations. Now, when I was a kid, this was the socially accepted norm. Medusa's the villain, she's a monster, she's a bad guy. It's totally good that Perseus eventually killed her. However, over the last 10 years or so, that whole idea has been heavily criticized and debated. Seriously, you cannot talk about, joke about, or even mention Medusa online without a significant number of people showing up to tell you that Medusa was actually an innocent victim of assault in the original source material, and it's downright ignorant or even wrong to say that she was the villain or a monster or in any way in the wrong. I've watched people yell at each other about this, I've watched people yell at certain forms of media about this, people have yelled at me about this as well. And that's not even the only stuff people are divided about. I've also seen people argue a lot about her appearance, like, was she a hideous, monstrous-looking woman, or was she still beautiful, just with snake hair? Did she have wings? Did she have a serpentine lower body, as shown in a lot of media? Did she have scaly serpentine skin, or did she have bronze skin? And people also seem to argue about how her powers work, like, we all know, or at least it's generally accepted, that Medusa could turn people to stone. But how did it work? That's something people seem to argue about. Like, did men turn to stone when they looked at her features, or was it only if they looked in her eyes? Also, did it only work on men, or did it work on people in general? And in addition to that, was it even when men looked at her, or was it when she looked at other people? Was it literally her gaze that was turning them to stone, as shown in the God of War games? And on top of that, some people argue as to whether she was actually turning people to stone or simply petrifying them with her ugliness. And I also see people arguing about whether her sisters could turn people to stone or not. Yeah, people argue about a lot. So, which is it? Is she a villain, or is she a victim? And what are the answers to all those other arguments? Well, it's not super simple, because, come on guys, we all know that the story of Medusa is thousands of years old, and throughout that time, it has been retold and reinterpreted multiple times by multiple different authors. From everything I've seen with all the different comments and videos and movies and just what people are generally saying and the stories I read growing up, it seems there are 4 different versions as to what Medusa's origin is. Number 1 is that Medusa was always a monster. There was no curse involved, she was never human or human-looking. Born a monster, was one all the way up until the day Perseus chopped her head off. Version number 2, and this is probably the least known one, is that she was originally a human-looking woman, however, she was very beautiful and boasted that she was more beautiful than the goddess Athena, and so she was poetically punished by Athena, turning her into a monster so ugly no one could look at her anymore without turning to stone. Now, growing up, these were the 2 versions I heard. Version number 3, however, and this is probably the most spread around version, is the version where Medusa was once a human-looking woman and was an innocent victim, a priestess of Athena who Poseidon lusted after up until he assaulted her in Athena's temple, and Athena blamed the victim and punished Medusa for defiling the temple by turning her into a monster. Then there's version number 4. This is an interesting one. This is basically the same as version number 3 up until the end, where it says that the reason Athena turned Medusa into a monster after she was assaulted wasn't to punish her, it was to protect her. She gave her a gaze that turned men to stone as a way to ensure that no man would ever force himself on her again. Okay. I believe the best way to determine the validity of these differing tales is, rather than arguing on message boards, let's take a look at the actual ancient sources. Now, imagery of Gorgons goes back way, way, way long ago, but the oldest known written account of Medusa comes from Hesiod's Theogony. It is written on page 11, around line 270, in case you want to check for yourself. He states, "To Phorcys, Ceto bore the Gorgons, who live beyond famed Oceanus at the world's edge hard by night, where the clear-voiced Hesperides are Stheno, Euryale, and Medusa, who suffered a grim fate. She was mortal, but the other two immortal and ageless, and with her the god of sable locks lay in a soft meadow among the spring flowers. And when Perseus cut off her head from her neck, out sprang great Chrysaor and the horse Pegasus." And that's it. That's all he wrote about her. She was born, she was mortal, she got knocked up, and she was killed. Didn't elaborate on her looks or anything else. Okay, in Hesiod's defense, he did state that they were Gorgons, and Gorgon iconography was very popular in ancient Greece, so maybe he thought he didn't need to describe the way they looked, much like one doesn't need to describe how a lion or a boar looks. You're probably wondering who the god of sable locks is. That is Poseidon. It's another term for him, apparently. And as you can see from this story, it's not suggested that he forced himself on Medusa. I mean, the way that they're hooking up is described in a soft meadow among the spring flowers. That kinda sounds like a rom-com. And yeah, in case you didn't know, Medusa and Poseidon were the parents of Pegasus and Chrysaor. Chrysaor was either a man with a golden sword or a winged boar, and they both sprang from Medusa's neck after she was decapitated. Homer also mentioned her in his works, though very briefly and absolutely nothing to do with her origins. The Iliad contains a few references to the Aegis shield and the fact that it had a terrifying, awful Gorgon face on it, and the Odyssey contains a segment where Odysseus fears that Persephone might send the head of the Gorgon at him from the house of Hades. It's pretty clear who he's talking about. This seems to suggest that Medusa is already dead, which makes sense. The Odyssey takes place way after the Perseus story, and her head is now severed and sentient in the underworld. Which, by the way, is something that the Hades video game definitely pulled from. Now, to be fair, Medusa is not mentioned by name, so if you want, I guess you could make an argument that it's a different Gorgon. However, we do know from other stories that it was Medusa's head that was placed on Aegis, aside from one alternate which we'll get to later, and Medusa's head was severed even in the Hesiod story. So if he's going to mention a severed Gorgon head in Hades, odds are he's talking about Medusa. Then we have the Library by Apollodorus, and thankfully this version gives us a lot more details on her. On page 66 during the Tale of Perseus, quote, "When he arrived there, he caught the Gorgons asleep. Their names were Stheno, Euryale, and Medusa. Only Medusa was mortal, and for that reason it was her head that Perseus was sent to fetch. The Gorgons had heads with scaly serpents coiled around them, and large tusks like those of swine, and hands of bronze, and wings of gold, which gave them the power of flight, and they turned all who beheld them to stone." Nice to finally get a written account of what they look like. And then on page 67, after Perseus has killed Medusa and used her head for several things, it states that he gave the head to Athena. Quote, "Athena fixed the Gorgon's head to the center of her shield, but there are some who say that Medusa lost her head because of Athena, for they say that the Gorgon had claimed to rival the goddess in beauty." Ah, that's interesting. So it would seem that while Hesiod's theogony lends legitimacy to the idea that Medusa was born a Gorgon and always was one, the Library by Apollodorus lends legitimacy to that version, and also the version where Medusa boasted that she was more beautiful than Athena, or at least just compared herself in some way. So the first two versions that I mentioned earlier are authentic Greek stories. In fact, the mythology book, Big Ideas Simply Explained, it's a more modern source, but still, echoes this statement. It says right here, "According to some myths, Medusa had been born monstrous, but in others, she had been cursed by the goddess Athena for her vanity." I really wish I could elaborate on this version where Medusa compares her beauty to Athena, but sadly, I couldn't find another authentic Greek source backing it up. Every time I tried to search, I just got sidetracked by the assault story. Like, literally, I went and asked questions for people online for particular sources, and I immediately got shut down by those people demanding I accept that she was a victim the whole time. It's really hard to talk to people, man. But if you know of any authentic Greek sources other than the library that talk about that version, I'd really love if you could bring them to my attention. And as a bonus little fun fact, apparently according to this book, Heracles also encountered Medusa. On page 84, it says that when he went to the underworld to fetch Cerberus, he encountered her phantom and got scared by it. Then on page 88, there is a brief mention that Heracles was given a strand of Medusa's hair by Athena, and even just that strand of hair could scare people away at the sight of it. So, I think we've definitely answered some questions so far. While the stories do acknowledge that Poseidon and Medusa had children together, there's nothing about it being forceful or assault. Like, Hesiod makes it sound romantic, and Apollodorus briefly mentions that they had kids together, but doesn't elaborate on it in any way. So, not really any Greek sources mentioning that she was a victim. From what I can tell, even the more modern Greek sources don't seem to mention it. In fact, a lot of them don't mention a transformation at all. It's pretty common to just say that she was always a Gorgon. Apollodorus also clearly states that looking upon the Gorgons is what turns you to stone. Nothing about it being specifically men, or specifically eye contact, or the gaze of the Gorgon causing it, and that's further backed up by the fact that further in his story it states that Perseus had to look into his mirror shield while Medusa was asleep in order to get to her without getting turned to stone and cut her head off. If it was all about eye contact, her being asleep would negate that, as it would if it was her gaze that caused it. Apollodorus also states that it is Medusa and her sisters that turn men to stone, not just Medusa. Now, appearance-wise, Hesiod doesn't really give us much for that, but Homer describes Gorgon appearances as terrible, dreadful, and awful. So I think it's safe to say he didn't intend for them to be attractive. And of course Apollodorus describes them as snake-haired, boar-tusked, with wings and bronze skin. So, again, unless that's your thing, in which case, not judging. And like I said earlier, Gorgon iconography goes way, way back. In fact, to thousands of years before any of these books were written. You can see all kinds of crazy creative designs, including the wings, tusks, and snake hair Apollodorus mentioned, but also other stuff like beards and tongues sticking out. And another fun thing about Gorgons is because they were so shocking and freaky, it was believed that their faces could be used to ward away evil by scaring it. Similar to jack-o'-lanterns, or things a lot of different cultures do, people would put the faces of Gorgons up on their homes or bathhouses or sacred sites to keep away those who would do them harm. And it's very likely that this practice fed into the idea that Medusa is not to be feared but some sort of protective woman. Which is ironic because she only protects you by being feared. It's a bit of both, guys. Plus, there's also legends of another lesser-known Gorgon known as Aix. I did a video on this one a while back, but basically it's an elder Gorgon with goat-like features that sided with the Titans during their great war with the Olympians. It was slain by Zeus, and he used its remains to make the Aegis shield and stuck its face on. Now, obviously, you're thinking, I thought Medusa's face was on the shield. Yeah, conflicting stories. Most likely, one was a reinterpretation of the other. Unless, of course, you want to think that the Aegis shield has Medusa's face on top of another Gorgon's face. Superfluous as that may be. But okay, enough little detours, enough fun facts. I know why you guys are here. Mythology guy, who wrote the version where she was a victim of assault? It's gotta be somewhere. You're right. It is in Ovid's Metamorphoses. Now, before you celebrate, this is not a Greek source. Ovid was Roman. And on top of that, Ovid, when writing this, actually did not intend for it to be some sacred religious text. Everything I've found about his process suggests that he wrote this to be a fun form of poetry. And yet, this has influenced the most widespread version of the Medusa story. I mean, you gotta give the guy props. He clearly wrote well and clearly got widespread. I mean, good for him. So let's take a look at this version which has spread so far and caused so many arguments. During the Perseus tale, page 170, line 790, Medusa, alone of her sisters, had snakes entwined in her hair. So I guess Medusa's sisters were just normal in this version? It's interesting, no one ever talks about that. A few lines later, it then says, quote, Medusa was once an exceedingly beautiful maiden, whose hand in marriage was jealously sought by an army of suitors. According to someone who told me he'd seen it, this is Perseus talking, her marvelous hair was her crowning glory. The story goes that Neptune, the sea god, forced himself on this glorious creature inside the shrine of Minerva. Jove's daughter screened her virginal eyes with her aegis in horror, and punished the sin by transforming the Gorgon's beautiful hair into horrible snakes. That explains why, to startle her foes into terror, the goddess always displays those snakes on the front of her bosom. So this also states that Athena, has a Medusa design, or at least of the snakes, on her chest piece, I'm guessing. As you can probably tell by the way that read, the Roman names are being used, Neptune and Minerva, not Poseidon and Athena. And yet people keep referencing this story as though it's Greek and using the names Poseidon and Athena. And as you heard in this story, it seems that only Medusa's hair was changed to snakes and nothing else was changed about her, so that's probably the origin of that little version of the story where it's only the snake hair and everything else stayed beautiful. Oh, and if you want an added little fun fact, much later in Ovid's story during the Arachne storyline, it briefly states that Medusa knew Poseidon in the form of a winged bird. Not entirely sure what that means, like, was he in bird form when he forced himself on her, or did he visit her later in bird form? It's probably the former. That would explain why their offspring were often depicted with wings, Pegasus and the boar version of Chrysaor. Theory. You may have also noticed that while this story does describe Neptune boinking Medusa in a shrine of Minerva, it never once says that Medusa was a priestess of Minerva. And yet people say that all the time, and I honestly have no idea where they're pulling that from. And I'm not going to list them all, but Ovid makes a ton of other changes to Greek mythology for this Roman version. I mean, one that always drove me nuts was the fact that he has Perseus use the head of Medusa to turn Atlas into stone. Not just a stone, he turns him into a mountain. There's several things wrong with that. First of all, why a mountain? Like, why not retain his shape like everyone else does? Second, you're indicating that Atlas is gigantic, which we know from other stories is not true. The Titans weren't gigantic. Atlas definitely wasn't gigantic. It's a common mistake people make, and it's honestly the kind of topic I'd prefer to tackle in a completely separate video. Third, if Atlas became a mountain, that doesn't line up with the Heracles story, or I guess in this case Hercules story, that takes place several generations later, where Hercules meets up with him and he helps him to get the apples from the Hesperides tree. What, does the mountain scooch over and pick the apples? It doesn't make any sense. Now again, I actually give Ovid props for how well received his telling was. The dude clearly had talent. And I wouldn't have any problem with this book whatsoever if people would just stop acting like this is the definitive or only version of the Medusa story.
Medusa was not a villain, she was a victim, and I'm going to tell you why.
Did you know that Medusa wasn't born a monster, but was actually a victim of divine injustice?
Did you know that Medusa, the monster with serpent hair, was never truly evil?
They say Medusa was a monster. They say a woman so cursed that one look could turn you to stone. But what if the real story was never about a monster at all?
I've even found people who act like this was the very first version and the other ones that I've referenced came about afterwards and bastardized the story. And it's a bit of a pet peeve of mine how people will constantly do videos or articles or whatever of Medusa referencing this version of the story and referring them to the untold origins of Medusa or the hidden origins or whatever. This is not the origin. This is the third or fourth or way more reinterpretation of the story. And to call it the hidden or unknown origins is ridiculous because I'm pretty darn sure this has become the most widespread version. Maybe not in Hollywood or anything, but internet-wise, you can't get away from this thing. I know it sounds like I'm taking this a little too seriously, but you would not believe the amount of times I have watched people viscerally attack someone for acknowledging acknowledging that any version other than this one can be legitimate. Like, people have outright made threats to content creators for talking about the Hesiod or the Homer or the Apollodorus versions. You know, the Greek versions, while being outright wrong about which one came first or which one is more legitimate. But yeah, now that that's out of the way and the other two versions are out of the way, that just leaves us with the fourth version I mentioned before. The idea that Medusa was a victim of Poseidon in Athena's temple, and Athena transformed her into a monstrous Gorgon in order to protect her. And that's why she gave her a stare that would turn people to stone, so that no man would force himself on her again in the future. This version is not legitimate. I'm sorry. It's not in any ancient source whatsoever. Not Greek, not Roman, not anything else. This version seems to have originated on the modern internet. Feel free to prove me wrong, but that's the best I can find. I know it's highly resonated with women's movements and the Me Too movement and whatnot, and good for you. I'm not gonna yuck your yum, but it's not legit. I'm sorry. And in a way, it's probably good that it's not legit because it makes absolutely no sense. Look, surface level, it's a cute little uplifting idea, but think about it and it kind of falls apart instantly. Like what, you're gonna protect someone by mutating them and taking their looks away from them? Also, after Medusa is transformed, she has to go live in isolation in a cave. That doesn't sound like a fun form of protection or anything like that. And even if we can consider that this was good for Medusa overall, Athena kind of undoes it by later helping Perseus to kill her. Like, she assists Perseus during his journey to get to her, she helps him get to her, gives him what he needs to kill her, and in some tellings directly guides his hand to cutting off her head. I'm sorry, in what way is that protecting her? And then goes the extra mile by taking her severed head and sticking it on her shield as a trophy. Yeah, you're really doing a great job protecting that woman, Athena. So, forgive me if I don't put a lot of stock in that version of the story. While we're here, I might as well clear up a few other misconceptions about the Medusa and Perseus stories. As you can probably tell from everything I've presented, Medusa was not half woman and then the lower half of a snake. The Clash of the Titans films actually got this wrong. She was sometimes said to have scaly snake features, but again, no lower half of a snake. That very likely came from confusing her with Echidna or Lamia, other monstrous women in Greek mythology who were said to have the lower half of a snake, or just be half snake in some way. A lot of people also seem to think that Perseus rode Pegasus after Pegasus sprang from Medusa's neck. That is also not in any Greek or Roman source that I can find, at least not a written one. Perseus did fly to and from Medusa's island using winged shoes given to him by the gods, but the first Greek warrior to ride Pegasus was actually a man named Bellerophon. Neither Perseus nor Heracles ever rode it, despite what you see in a lot of media. However, I do forgive people a little more for this misconception, because it would seem there were actually some artists in the Renaissance who painted Perseus with Pegasus, so it would seem that is where the misconception began. So I don't really blame modern people. I blame those people. Another misconception I'm really getting tired of is this idea that Perseus was some evil, sexist asshole. I don't even know where you guys are getting that. What, because he killed Medusa? Okay, let's go over Perseus' story. From a very young age, Perseus would protect his mother from the unwanted advances of the local king. And we know his mother didn't want that king, because once Perseus was away, his mother hid from that king so he couldn't get with her. So he was protecting his mother from a man who would God knows what to her. Yeah, real sexist there, isn't he? After that, he worked directly with the gods, including Athena, in fact, probably most closely with Athena, since she literally guided his hand to kill Medusa. And after he finished all of his travels, he gifted the Medusa head to Athena because he thought she deserved it more than he did. Sexist. On his way home, he saw an innocent woman named Andromeda who was about to be sacrificed to the sea monster Cetus, and his immediate reaction was to save her from the monster. What a horrible guy. And immediately after that, he saved Andromeda again from her uncle who was going to try to kidnap her. Then when he got home and found out that that king was trying to get with his mother again, he turned that king to stone to save his mother from him. When his mother chose another man to marry, he didn't get involved in stopping that, so you can't say he was just possessive of his mother or something like that, which I actually have seen some people say. The literal only argument I could possibly see you make for Perseus being sexist at all is in one version of his story. When he saves Andromeda, he requests that she be given to him as his wife in exchange. Fine, I guess you could say something about that, but it's also kind of just a sign of the classic hero's tale of the times. You save the pretty girl, you get the pretty girl. I would also like to think that Andromeda would be kind of into a handsome man she just watched single-handedly slay a giant monster to save her. I know a few women that I know would be into that. It's not like Perseus slew Medusa for his own narcissism or because he hated women or just wanted to kill something. He did it because he had been put in a position where, honorably, he had no choice. He owed the king a favor, and the king said, "I want you to go kill Medusa." It wasn't up to him. You seriously have to try to hate on Perseus. Like, you have to go out of your way to get mad about this story. Because if you read as much Greek mythology as I do, or even maybe just one Greek mythology book, you'll know that Perseus's tale is one of the most feel-good, easy-to-root-for, likable protagonists, lack of crazy, horribly depressing stuff going on, happy ending stories you can find in all of Greek mythology. It's literally something people say all the time. Perseus is the only guy who got a happy ending. And there are tons of other Greek tales of heroes who should have got happy endings, but then had crappy family lives that kind of made it all fall apart. I think the fact that Perseus doesn't have that probably speaks to him being a good husband and father. At least that's what I would assume. And yet we keep seeing people who actively say that they wish Perseus had died instead of Medusa for some reason. Probably the most famous example of that is this statue. It was created in 2008, and several years later during the Me Too movement, it was celebrated and installed in Manhattan, right across from the criminal courthouse, I believe. It seems to have been put there as a way to inspire the victims. Now, listen. If this thing actually did inspire victims, if it made them feel better or feel stronger or gave them more courage in those horrific times, that's wonderful. That's just objectively a good thing. I'm glad it did that for them. And I think we can all agree that that is more important than mythical accuracy. That being said, statue's a little weird. First of all, huge missed opportunity to make the carpet match the drapes. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. But also, if this is supposed to be a symbol of a woman taking back the power from her abuser, why isn't she holding Poseidon's head? Why Perseus is? I guess it's just so it can be an inverse of that famous statue where Perseus holds her head. But I'm pretty sure you would have gotten no complaints from the vast majority of people if you made that Poseidon or Zeus or someone who actually is a piece of crap in Greek and Roman mythology. Artistically, though, it does look very nice. There's a lot of really great detail on this thing. Speaking of sculptures, I'm going to take this opportunity to shout out Jazza. This guy sculpts all kinds of crazy things, and about a year ago, he did a video where he created a mythically accurate Medusa sculpture. I'm not going to show the final result here because I do want you to go watch the video, but it looks phenomenal. I would love to have what he made in my room. I'm also going to shout out Jake W. and Mythology and Fiction Explained for making really solid, well-informed videos on this topic, and I really needed videos like these after the amount of other ones I had to watch. In fact, let's break one of them down. This is one of the most popular videos on the topic. Over 9 million views. God help me.
Medusa is not evil.
Oh, God.
She is actually an innocent woman, the most beautiful woman of all time.
No, she isn't. There is no mention of that even in the Ovid story. It says she was a significantly beautiful woman, as you heard me say earlier, but I guess this guy never heard of Helen of Troy.
Who was unfairly turned into a monster by the goddess we consider the kindest of all, Athena.
I'm sorry, in what world are we considering Athena the kindest goddess of all? Bro, Hestia is Bestia.
Because Poseidon forced himself on Medusa in Athena's temple.
Yeah, great. Use the Greek versions of the names while telling the Roman version of the story.
And you know this horse, Pegasus? Yeah, Pegasus is Medusa's child. Medusa devoted herself to Athena, the virgin goddess of purity, wisdom, and strategic warfare. Medusa moved into Athena's temple full time.
No, she didn't. Again, not even in the Ovid story. I don't know where people are getting this.
The problem was that she was so beautiful that she literally attracted a crowd of simps. Enter Athena, the goddess of wisdom. A title she must have forgot for a minute because she got mad jealous about all the attention Medusa was getting.
No? What? No! Like, there is no version that says that. In fact, that contradicts what you said earlier, where Athena is the virgin goddess of purity. Why would she care about the attention Medusa is getting? Hi?
And that's where Poseidon comes in. Backstory, Poseidon and his niece Athena had a forever feud going on where they tried to make each other's lives miserable ever since Athena stole one of the cities that worship Poseidon from him, a city now known as Athens.
Athena did not steal Athens from Poseidon. They were both involved in the founding of Athens, and right as it was founded, they had a competition to decide who would be the prime deity of the town, which Poseidon lost. That's not stealing, and that's not the town already belonging to Poseidon before Athena. What's the source on this?
Poseidon saw Athena's anger and wanted to be the cherry on top by getting on top of Medusa, so he did exactly that, forced his way inside Athena's temple. Athena punished Medusa for it. Her logic, she said it was Medusa's fault for being so flashy with her beauty.
It does not say that anywhere.
So she turned Medusa into the hideous snake monster we now know, and from now on, everybody that would look at Medusa was turned into stone. Hence all the soldiers who were coming for her head because they wanted to slay the monster, but this was just a poor girl who wanted to be left alone, so Medusa fled to an island to live in peace, and there the girls still worship Athena.
No. What source says anything about Medusa still worshipping Athena after she was transformed? This is just confusing at this point.
Until one day she was finally beheaded by Zeus' son Perseus on his quest to become a hero.
He was not on a quest to become a hero. He was fulfilling an obligation.
And today history class teaches us that Perseus is a hero and Medusa is a monster. Yeah, find the social commentary in this one.
I'm finding the social misinformation on this one.
A miracle emerged out of all of this. From the blood of Medusa's severed head grew new life, the giant cryosaur, and arguably history's most famous and most beautiful horse, Pegasus.
This is actually kind of a funny, incorrect statement, which I can use to be educational. Chrysaor and Pegasus didn't come from Medusa's blood dripping from her head. They were already inside Medusa's womb and sprung out of the neck afterwards. What's funny is there actually were creatures that came from Medusa's blood. Those were serpents, including the Amphisbaena. It's something about Medusa's blood, like being so monstrous that it created more monsters. But it's not mentioned here.
Pegasus, which then became the trusted seat of Perseus, the man who just slayed its mother. I swear only in Greek mythology.
No, that's not what happened. How can you swear only in Greek mythology? You didn't read any of it.
It is important to note that Medusa's origin and story was originally never definitive. There was no consensus until the poet Ovid wrote his version 8 CE and everyone connected with it and adopted it into Greek and Roman mythology.
What? What do you mean there was no version of Medusa's story before Ovid? Hello? Hello? I just quoted several of them. Hi? And Ovid's is not even the most, well-defined version. I would say that the library by Apollodorus actually describes her a lot more clearly and easily. One of the, all due respect, one of the annoying things about the way Ovid writes is he writes every story out of order. In fact, it's one of the less concise ways I've had to read something before. And by the way, no, the Greeks did not adopt Ovid's version of the story. You are welcome to find me any Greek source telling otherwise. You literally just admitted that you are quoting a Roman version of the story!
If you want, I will do some videos in general on the confusing topic of where Roman and Greek mythology differ.
Well, that was miserable. Okay, look, I don't want to be a jerk. No hate to this guy personally. I took a look at his channel, and it seems like he's genuinely trying to be entertaining and a little bit educational at the same time. So, I'm not mad at him. I'm just mad at this wave of misinformation that keeps getting spread around as though it's truth. And, like I said, this is one of the most viewed videos on the topic, and 90% of the audience is taking it as gospel. So, bro, constructive criticism, just read the books. Just read the original books. Like, these are less than $20 each, in some cases less than $10 each. But, you know, if that's too much, like, guess what? Fun fact to you and everyone else watching. You can read all of those completely for free on theoi.com. I'll link theoi.com in the description. Seriously. And as I watched several more of these videos, something really depressing settled in. You remember when I made that video about that fake story that there's a big ending to Greek mythology? And one of the annoying things about that was the vast majority of the videos on that topic were all just copying each other and repeating what each other were saying. Well, there seems to be a lot of that going on with these Medusa videos as well. Like, a lot of these TikTokers or YouTubers or Instagrammers are literally just copying each other, which really bums me out because it's so clear they're doing no real research of their own, because there is so much you could easily disprove if you would just read one of these damn books. And if that sounds overly negative and derivative of me to say, like, you're probably thinking, mythology guy, you can't guarantee that they're all just copying each other and being lazy. Well, here's another video on the same topic from a completely different channel.
Medusa is not evil. She was once the most beautiful woman in the world. The goddess Athena, often seen as wise and pure, unjustly turned her into a monster. Medusa is also the mother of Pegasus, the winged horse. It may sound unbelievable, but it all starts with her beauty. Medusa attracted the attention of men, women, gods, and mortals. No one could ignore her, yet she didn't seek attention. Medusa devoted her life to Athena, the goddess of purity, wisdom, and strategy. She lived in Athena's temple, serving day and night. However, her beauty was too bright to hide. Soon suitors gathered outside the temple daily, hoping for a glimpse of her. Athena watched and grew jealous. She resented that her priestess received more admiration than she did. This is where Poseidon, Athena's enemy and god of the sea, comes into the story. Angered by losing a beloved city, he sought revenge against Athena. He entered the temple and violated Medusa in its holiest place, where no god should go. Instead of punishing Poseidon, Athena punished Medusa, who was guilty only of being too beautiful. She turned her into a monster, with snakes for hair and a gaze that could turn anyone to stone. From that moment, people sought to kill her, not because she was cruel, but because she was dangerous. Medusa fled to a deserted island, wanting peace, while still praying to Athena, the same goddess who condemned her. Then, one day, Perseus, son of Zeus, arrived. Armed to become a hero, he beheaded her and took her head. From her spilled blood, two sacred creatures were born, Chrysaor and Pegasus, the winged horse meant to accompany the man who killed his mother. Today we remember Perseus as a hero, and see Medusa only as a monster.
Yeah, did you notice any similar wording there? What's my point in all of this? Well, here it is. If you're just enjoying some version of a story, especially a story that has to do with somebody's culture, more power to you. Enjoy it, have a great time with it, have fun. But if you're truly passionate about it or going to adapt it into something, or especially if you're going to create a form of content that is meant to educate people on that topic, please, read some authentic sources first. Don't just watch one video or look at one twit longer or take someone's comment as gospel, or even, like, if you do look at a book, don't just take one of the most recent examples as perfect gospel. Or if you are going to take this as the definitive version, make it clear that that's the version you're talking about. Don't say, hey, here's what happened to Medusa in Greek mythology when you have just read a Roman book about it. That's like reading the Book of Mormon and then adapting it in what you are calling a Jewish production or a Jewish educational video. Do you see the problem with that? The internet is a wild and crazy place, and you shouldn't just believe what some random person on the internet says at face value. Unless it's me. Because I'm a perfect person and everything I say is true. Worship me. But yeah, this is something I've wanted to talk about for a long time because I keep seeing it pop up in my comments and getting tagged in videos about it and blah, 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 blah. And I keep watching you guys argue with each other in the comments about it. Oh, there is so much. But hopefully now that I've fully addressed it, I can move on from Medusa misinformation. No, screw that, I'm done. No, we're out of here. No. I don't know how to end videos.